All right, welcome to the second installment of my 2019 interviews. Our special guest today is David Lawrence Palmer, the Leo King. Thank you for joining me, David.
Oh, thank you for having me, Vic. Super excited to be here.
It's my pleasure. It's totally my pleasure. All right, so how about we jump into these questions and find out all about you and what you think.
Right on.
All right, so the first thing I want to ask you is how you would describe the kind of astrology that you practice.
The kind of astrology that I practice, I would consider it evolutionary astrology. I'm really focused more on the evolution of the consciousness of not only, I guess you could say, the world, which the typical term has always been mundane astrology, but I've always felt that term doesn't make sense. Mundane is very bland and boring. And I feel evolutionary astrology in combination with what I've always called inclusive astrology when I first started is really finding a way to see where consciousness is evolving, and that the astrology itself is actually the roadmap to where consciousness is changing, and to understand how it changes the fundamental core of what is changing in the consciousness. So it's actually not just this kind of bland understanding of consciousness evolving, but more specific understanding of what in consciousness is evolving in ourselves on a global scale. And I guess you could call it even on a galactic scale as well, just really combining all those forces together. And consciousness to me is the biggest part of astrology, more than just, when are you going to get rich, or is this relationship going to break up? I'm much more focused on what are the lessons we're learning, where are we growing, and where, more importantly, is humanity itself growing? I'm really focused on that.
So is this like a system that you developed yourself, or did you pick it up somewhere else or modify it? How does it work? What does the evolutionary astrology look like?
I picked it up myself because I remember when I started doing actual horoscopes every day, a lot of people were doing sun sign astrology horoscopes in Western. And I just felt not too called to that. I felt much more called to this, I guess you could say it was a psychic or a channeled element to the astrology, and seeing the understanding of what was happening in a horoscope and going, how is this affecting everybody? Because I feel that we all are going through the same thing. Like when you go talk to people at a social event, your family, a best friend, there's a common denominator with us all as humans that are evolving. And I really wanted to find that common denominator in the connection to the astrology. But I use tropical, of course, Western, but I combine with a lot of Eastern philosophy. I combine Chinese astrology. And I think that's what's kind of cool is I think that there's a new astrology being born right now. And I feel that I don't want to attach myself to a certain system. Whatever's all coming up and working at the moment is where I go.
Okay, so that's a good segue to my next question, because the next thing I want to ask you is how you got involved with astrology in the first place.
The more direct, more professional form of it was really just, it was dating girls in high school and looking at books that had just basic sun sign astrology. And it got a little funky for me because my grandfather passed when I was 18 and I was in the military. And so I wasn't able to go to his funeral. I wasn't able to really connect with him on his deathbed. And I have two grandfathers, of course, but it was my mother's father. And I had been practicing just looking at charts and so forth, because during my time in the service, it didn't end up too well for me. I got kind of kicked out. It wasn't that bad, though. I got like an other than honorable discharge. So people go, oh, is it dishonorable? No. But my mother told me, your grandfather did astrology for about 40 years.
Wow. But
he didn't do it professionally. He did it handwritten charts, and he did it for, and I'll be honest, I think it was for women that he found attractive. And there was a little bit of that with me too. I'll be honest, I'm blunt. Like it was girls that I was going to raves with or dating and using astrology to help them and be a connector. That was my connecting point. Yeah. And so that's how I really got involved. And then professionally wise, I there was a man named Christopher Witecki. He started doing the first video astrology horoscopes in like 2005 on YouTube, when YouTube was brand new and it still hadn't been bought by Google. And I found him and we became best friends. And then I worked for him and I learned a lot about astrology from him, watching how he did readings, watching how he did horoscopes, because it was awesome to have both of those as a combination as my teacher, somebody who is actually fundamentally doing readings at the same time producing 60 video horoscopes a week. And this is back when in 2005 and 6, you have to remember, like, computers were not that great yet. And so he would capture off a camera onto the computer. He had a green screen in his living room, and then I would help him capture it. And then he would spend 4 hours every night producing the videos to put out for free. And he did that for years. So it was really a good time of learning how it all was working. And then I did all of the edits to his recordings for his readings. So it was interesting for me to see his style of how he did readings. And it was also cool because it just really gave me the confidence to see, oh, this is how an astrologer works. And then right after that, I had gotten an email because I was doing a little bit with astrology online in 2009 and 10. I did some reality show where I came out as an astrologer, and I was doing like chart readings for people, and I was doing some video. And I got this big like venture capitalist that wrote me this email asking for a spokesman for a like direct to TV infomercial about an astrology report to be sent out like on television. And the man who created the report is Michael Erlewine, who just got the Lifetime Achievement Award at this last UAC 2018. And so they connected me with Michael Erlewine. And so Michael Erlewine and I got connected in 2011, and I got to learn a massive amount of information from him. Talk about an amazing teacher, because he knows everything about Tibetan astrology he built, he put astrology on the computer. I mean, he's the man who figured it out and put it on there. And he's really also in the same manner as far as not attached to just one system and that's it. He's very about, he got me into helio-based astrology. He got me into so many different forms and made me realize you don't have to stick to one form. And that man taught me a lot. And we had deep conversations about astrology for the year we worked together and put the infomercial out. And the actual product was not based off tropical, like Western typical geo-astrology or Vedic astrology. It was based off helio-based astrology, where he came up with his own star types, where he came up with his own archetypes for based on the positions of the planets from the sun's point of view, with the sun at the center of the chart, and was able to blow my mind with these 4 archetypes and how real they really were to our soul. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And then I became kind of a starving artist on Venice Beach doing readings for people after that, because the infomercial did not do well. And that was where I finally said, I'm going to do this full time, because I was doing Venice Beach readings for about 3 months. And that was how I got money to eat. It was pretty wild, actually.
Venice Beach is an old haunt of mine too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you actually get out of that situation?
So, I worked, it was the last 9 to 5 I ever had. I had to take some sort of job while I was on Venice Beach, because it was just $20 a day or sometimes $100 a day. And that was just enough to give me the gas in my car that was broken already. And I was selling limo services, yacht services, and private plane services. And it was during a Mars retrograde, actually, of 2012. And I was really like, this is not what I want to do. So I said, I'm going to do a video horoscope every day about this collective consciousness. That's what I came out saying it was.
Yeah.
And then within a month, people were booking readings every day. And then I went in May to UAC 2012 in New Orleans. And I worked for Michael Erlewine when he was still the owner of Matrix Software. and I helped him with his launch of Blue Star, which was one of the last programs that Matrix came out with. And so I was at the booth the whole week, the whole 8 days, and I met all the astrologers, and I was doing readings on the side. I had a sign that said astrology readings with me from YouTube, you know, in my reality show I was on in 2010. And I was able to make a lot of money that week, enough to go back home and start doing it full time. And I've only missed 2 horoscopes since April 10th of 2012 of a daily video. So it's evolved into over 7,000 videos in the last 6.5 years.
Amazing. So when you do readings with people, like, you're tying them into like a bigger trend of what's going on, or is that just what you're thinking about when you're doing their reading?
That's a very good question. I mean, when I do a personal reading, of course, I'm very targeted on their individual stuff going on. But in the background, I'm also applying the understanding of where we're at now and what's evolving. And I don't have to really describe that too much to people when I'm doing their readings, because it's almost like it's a back layer that's helping me interpret to them how I'm interpreting the reading. But there's a very deep psychic element to my readings where I do connect with their guides. I worked with John Edward, the psychic, the famous psychic from TV, in 2014, and I went on one of his like tours where I actually was on stage with him, and we would tag team readings like with the same person. He's a medium, and so he would do a medium reading, and then I'd ask for their birthday, and then I would do a reading with him. And just being with him and working with him taught me how to truly be a psychic reader. And then I combine that with all of my astrology reading elements. And so that's really where I go with it. But I primarily am always looking at the natal chart. I use a Western chart, and I look at secondary progressions, solar arcs, and I already know where most of the transits are. And then I always have an ephemeris up, because I always enjoy looking at when somebody's planets, let's say they have a planet that's retrograde in their chart. I want to see, when I look at the ephemeris of the month they're born, the day they're born, I'll just go through every day after their birth until if that planet actually goes direct within their lifetime. And then I'll combine and look at the transits of that year and all the other aspects happening, and help them really find these moments in their life that I feel their soul is calling for, that hunger to know. That's what I focus on. Is they have questions and I answer them, but at the end of the day, I feel as an astrologer, it's almost like we know what deep in their soul is, what their need. It's not even like a necessity, but it's more of a fulfillment of some sort of conscious help that will let them feel relieved of understanding why they're at where their life, how it's changing, what they're learning, and how it's gonna change. Of course, there's a lot of probability, but at least it gives this sense of, I don't need to keep running my brain anymore about this. And there's kind of a, you know, a healing element to it.
Yeah. Would you say that's what you'd like to do the most in your readings? I was going to ask you, what do you feel is the most effective thing that you do in a reading, or what do you like to do the most? How do you like to help people the most with astrology?
I would say it's definitely a healing element of the soul. One, letting them know that they're not behind on the clock, or they're behind on the 8 ball in their life, that they're at the exact moment when these things are supposed to happen, because look what's about to happen. It's always that story. It's always, oh yeah, I know it's getting really hot and heavy in this space in your life, but look what's about to happen. Look where this is turning you towards. And really focusing on helping people know, you know, when they feel like they're in a cage, and we always feel like we're in some sort of cage in our life, and in every element, it could be anywhere. You know, there's always somebody with a financial issue, or a relationship issue, or just even a philosophical kind of battle in their life, or feeling guilt, or whatever they're dealing with, but showing them, hey, this is what you're learning from it. These are also the characteristics of your soul incarnation here, and what you're here to learn from this. And this is this turning point coming up at this point, wherever that might be. And here's some other turning points that will lead there to help you there. So, because sometimes it's farther out than
Yeah.
other people, right? Sometimes you'll get somebody, it's like, this is happening next week. So I don't know what else. I mean, you might think I'm crazy, but this is turning for you next week. And then other times you see as an astrologer and you go, oh man, this is a little bit away, but let's look at all these points to why that point is so important, and to not think that any moment, any second of this life is bad or a negative part, but to focus on how to understand the whole dominoes to where it's all going, and using, I think, that free will choice of how to determine how you'll go through all this stuff.
Yeah. So on the other side of the coin, what are the most difficult kind of scenarios that you face when you do readings with people, or what are the topics or things that you feel are the most difficult to address?
I think the hardest thing to address in a reading is when somebody is so, I guess you could, I don't even like the term ego anymore, but they're so set on everything in their life being a certain way and they expect it now. And helping them break through that cycle and starting to see that there is a higher order, a higher consciousness that has a better plan in place that actually will get them what they want in a better way. And there's been some people that it might take 40 minutes out of the first hour to get there, but that last 20, when they finally get there, is the greatest 20 of their life. And so being compassionate to that, not trying to be kind of like a, you're a bad person or you're doing this wrong, but it's coming. It's like I think the difficult part is coming across as, hey, I'm with you on this. I'm just trying to show you that there's this happening and there's these reasons for it, and you'll get through that,
Yep, I know. I feel the same. That's a real challenge.
It is.
All right, so now my last question about astrology. If you take astrology as a whole, like as a kind of a culture, the subculture, or whatever it is, a clique, a scene, what is it about that scene that inspires you the most? And on the other hand, what is it that you feel needs to be changed?
Well, I'm really inspired by the scene of astrology right now because it is flourishing, and a lot more of just the general population of the world is becoming more adapt to it. It's becoming much more integrated into society now than I remember. I mean, even though I'm 34 years old, I mean, when I was talking about it with friends in 2000 and 2001, and when I was, leaving high school, they just thought I was weird or they didn't understand it. Now I have a lot of friends that I went to high school with who are all hitting me up saying, hey, I watched your video. They know nothing about astrology. And they go, whatever you're saying, man, it's helped me a lot. And so that's what's the exciting part. I think also in the scene as well, there's so many awesome connections. The people who really helped get astrology here, the elders that are doing it, are some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. And they have done such a great job of pushing this forward and being super cool and being super open and being super accepting of the younger generation. I think where my I guess I get what's the other part of the question? Is it a disappointment or is it a difficult aspect or just maybe I'm something I just the thing that I think needs to change is there's some people that really feel astrology, of course it's sacred, but I feel like it's becoming like a secret society in many ways, like a Freemason element of like, hey, only astrologers need to be, talking about this. Like it's not open for a lot of people. And there feels to be, and I've had trouble with a lot of the organizations as far as calling a lot of the organizations out for really not connecting to the people of astrology, because I don't feel as astrologers that we are any better than anybody who is not an astrologer. I feel that astrology is for everybody. Astrology is not owned, just how spirituality is not owned by, in my understanding of it, it's not even really defined, I don't think. So I feel that there's this old kind of system that got us here that has to change now. I always use the analogy of Comic Con, which I know is kind of total opposite of what astrology is, but when you go to Comic Con, the people are there to go meet the characters, the writers, the people who create these stories, and it's a oneness thing. Like you don't see this like kind of, hey, this is Marvel Comics and you can't come in here, like you probably won't understand what we're doing. We're doing some pretty high-end animation now, and we do some pretty crazy storyboards. It's like, no, they're integrating with people. They're making people feel like we're all together. We all love the art. And I feel like a lot of the conferences now don't do a good outreach because, as you know, probably as being on YouTube and social media and bridging now towards connecting to all people with astrology, that's hasn't happened yet. We have not seen a conference with astrologers and astrology lovers together having a blast and all teaching and learning from each other and sharing knowledge. It's only other astrologers sharing knowledge with other astrologers. And let's be honest, it's all regurgitated the same thing. I don't know how many people, whenever I look at these conferences, it says, ooh, an hour and a half talk on Mars. It's like, okay, that's great. And it's beautiful. Or I think that the biggest downfall to a lot of these conferences is if you're on a board and you're a board member, you automatically get a speaker's position. Automatically. And it doesn't matter if you haven't done anything in astrology. Let's say maybe you wrote a book in 81 about Mars, but you haven't done anything since. I mean, sure, maybe on the board and helping with the board and helping stuff, but I'm saying as far as the information of astrology, the connecting to all people. So when you actually go to a conference, 2/3 of the conference are board members getting 2 spots, and then they're the ones choosing, and it's choosing, oh, I got you, it's your friend. So really, there's this whole crop of people doing radical, amazing things in astrology that aren't being heard, that are being pushed out and are threatening to them. And I've been on that side of that for a long time. And that's why I just went and created my own conferences, go create my own apps, go create my own thing. And because it makes me sad, but I still go to the conferences because I'm trying to connect. I'm trying to offer help. Because I would say that the last thing to kind of finish this question is astrology as an astrologer doesn't have to be this, I know it's sacred, but it doesn't have to also be this kind of one-way philosophical belief system of how an astrologer should be. I go on television shows. You can be monetarily extremely successful being an astrologer. And I have all the tools to help a lot of astrologers with that, but they don't want to hear it, or they think it's wrong too. But it's also, we live in a world in where anything is possible. And I believe that the universe gives back everything that you want for what you give into it. And I think when you put limits and caps and restrictions to what that looks like, not only do you limit yourself, but you start limiting other people around you because you start spreading that message.
Hear, hear. I would have said the exact same thing.
That's why I've always gotten along with you so well.
Yeah, I probably would have used the word politics. It seems like there's a lot of politics involved in instead of just actual love for content itself. There's just a lot of politics involved and crap.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, but let's go on. Now I'm going to shift the gear into more about the spiritual side of you. So I think I can predict kind of where your answer is going to go with this next question based on how you're not really nailed down to one particular way of doing astrology or into one, you're not affiliated with one group or anything. But my first question is, is there a particular philosophical or religious affiliation that you have?
Whew. That one's a good question. When I was 13 years old, my buddy asked me to go to a Christian youth group, just basic, Presbyterian church. And my mother and my father were not religious, although my father was raised under my grandmother, who was Christian Science, which was actually very different than a lot of things out there, really believing that you could heal yourself through just praying to God and not really using medicine. So my dad wasn't allowed to go to the health class during middle school, where you learn about the anatomy and stuff, because they believe the more, like, if, let's say cancer, for example, just that the fact that we are conscious of cancer allows, in the belief system of Christian Science, to actually be able to have cancer. Now, whether that's true or not, I really don't know. But so my buddy asked me to go to youth group. So I never had a religious background my whole life. And I went and I learned a lot about Christianity. And there was a big time in my life I was starting to really connect with Christianity. But it really was mainly to go hang out and skateboard with the chicks afterwards, because we had a great excuse on Wednesday night to go hang out with all the girls from high school. And they all went to youth group. And that's what I really, at the end of the day, found. And growing out of that, I've always associated myself as an understanding of the core values of Christianity, or how I guess you could say Jesus was. But it was Santos Bonacci who I really value as an astrologer. I've had some crazy things go on in the community also by backing him, which also at the same time I've also had to, that's a whole dramatic situation, but he really opened my eyes with connecting astrology and the story of it, and especially the tropical zodiac with Christianity and the story of Christianity. And I think Zeitgeist does that as well, and stuff like that. So no, I don't really associate with any traditional belief system anymore. I really feel that they're all incorporated, and I think that they all connect to astrology. So, but I don't think astrology is a belief either. So I don't really have a belief system.
Right. Well, how about like a philosophical way of looking at life? Like, for example, let me start off with this next question.
Mhm.
So what do you think is there, like, every day I wake up and sometimes I don't feel like waking up and sometimes I feel like waking up. So like, what is the purpose for waking up? Is there a purpose for like being alive? And if there is, what is it? Like the ultimate one, like, the ultimate evolutionary purpose.
I think that ultimate evolutionary purpose is defined by the individual soul and what they came here for. So that's why I'm very against dogmatic viewpoints, because for some souls, it might be that whatever their fulfillment of their soul's greatest feeling is, if they want to stay in bed all day and do that for 6 years and then maybe transform and not do that for a year and then go back, that if that fulfills you in your happiness and you feel aligned, because I think that's the main thing, is if you feel aligned, and whether we call that with the universe or just aligned in your life, where it just feels that something's going in the right direction in your life, that's really all that matters, I believe, in this soul fulfillment and to reach consciousness. I don't believe we reach enlightenment in this life, just because I always use the example of if somebody believes they're totally enlightened up on some mountaintop, next week there's going to be a new Tesla that's going to come out that's going to, be the fastest and have a new battery powered operated system or whatever. So you really don't know everything. There's no, and then if you look even in the spiritual world, I mean, I don't believe that the expansion of consciousness comes to a point of stopping. And if it does, I believe it kind of regurgitates into a whole new system. So I don't really believe in enlightenment, and I don't believe in any stopping point as being the point to reach.
But we should reach for a point, and it depends on the individual what that point is.
Yeah, and I would say that point is just a feeling of fulfillment, of whatever makes you feel happy and feel right inside, which love, I guess, would say the ultimate fulfillment would be. But I think love is in all directions. So, I mean, if you love being alone and being a computer person and that fulfills you, then you are on the right mark in life, I would say. And whatever makes you really feel happy. I mean, ethics get involved with that, with like, there's things like murder and, lying or cheating or stuff like that. And so when you get into those ethics, I feel like that's just what is called misaligned, where if you're in that world, everything starts falling apart. So really at the end of the day, I feel that it's just, does your life feel like it's flourishing or does it feel like it's falling apart? And that's the determination of the ethical issues. And it's pretty clear as day. I mean, I really don't believe that there is such thing as getting away with really bad, dark stuff and not having to deal with nothing but bad and dark stuff back at you to overcome constantly.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so here's another question. Okay, so actually this might be a tough one for us, because so far you've been taking the tack that I would call very fluid. So everything is very fluid and it's dependent upon the individual. But the way you would just actually address the issue of ethics was great. It was really on point. Your whole world will fall apart when it's unethical. So do you want to be misaligned like that? And if it's ethical, then it works and it flourishes. But so the next question then is is that how you would define the difference between good and bad, or right and wrong? How would you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think that, I think when there is a definition of good or bad from a standpoint of, I guess you could say, society, I think we can get convoluted. Like good and bad can turn into anything. I mean, what is good can be actually sometimes bad, and what is bad is actually sometimes good. I mean, I don't know why I'm channeling right now, like medical marijuana. We know now there's a lot of great aspects. It's helped people. I don't use it personally, but I know it has helped people. But forever it was demonized for like almost 100 years here in America. So for a long time, something that actually has been very good has actually been very bad. Or we look at things like in Western medicine, like there's been a lot of drugs that have had to be pulled off the shelf or caused very harmful aspects that we call good. So when this whole standard of what is good or bad comes, it really comes to a feeling of if it's good, it fulfills you, it fulfills everybody around you, and it feels like you're in a universe and a world that feels in alignment of happiness and joy and positivity and love and laughter. And if it's bad, I feel it feels empty. It feels even at the beginning it might feel really good. Like I used to be a drug addict, and so I guess you could say what we define as when it comes bad is when it's empty, right? Like you chase the high so long that even though it might at first have felt great, and so you're like, this isn't bad, it eventually ends up feeling empty. And so when you come to a place where you feel empty, and even though it felt good for a quick second, it's not everlasting. So I think because the universe, in my opinion, is infinite, if it's good, it will infinitely feel good, and it will not ever lose its solidarity of goodness or feeling. If it's bad, it will always remain constantly feeling like you're running out of gas, and then you're having to find the next gas station. Like I feel like there's this emptiness that comes with it that cannot be filled with that bad or whatever we call it, because. And I think, again, that the whole world is having to reshape even the determination of good or bad, or this goes into good and evil, actually, at the deepest core. I think. And what we've associated with evil for the last couple thousand years in Judeo-Christian society, and I think possibly we could even go in every other spiritual element in the world, I think is being redefined now. And I feel that's what the whole entire new world and the new evolution of consciousness is about, because I feel that we are reaching a different space in consciousness that humans haven't been in for eons and eons and eons. So that's kind of my answer, I guess.
No, it makes a lot of sense. There's so much for me to digest when I do interviews with people that it's hard for me to keep on track and keep the interview going because I just want to stop and think about what you just said. But let's go to, oh yeah, this is a good one. I have two more questions for you.
Cool.
So far, we just did one polarity, good and evil. This is another interesting polarity, which I kind of feel is super deeply ingrained in the fabric of what the universe is itself. The difference between masculine and feminine, or male and female. And because astrology deals so much with relationships, because people deal so much with relationships, so therefore our astrology does. I think it's a pretty interesting question to bring up. What's your sense of really like the key? Of course, there's a million little differences, but what's the key difference between male and female, or do you think there is none really ultimately?
I definitely think there's a difference. If you go plug in on a battery, the male end to the female end and everything, you will have an explosion.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to these big power plants and stuff. There's this actually really funny meme about taking a male and female, like, what do you mean I could be whatever I want, and putting both on the same element and blowing up the whole entire, whatever it is, power plant or whatever. But in my opinion, I feel masculine energy is a direct motion energy. It is initiation, and I believe that female is receiving. And I also believe that that both receive as well. Like, I think masculine energy receives from the direct initiation into things afterwards, whereas feminine energy receives at first, but then initiates and gives after. So it like reverses itself. So like, and I mean, we have to use the typical element of sex. I mean, a man creates the initial aspect, the woman then receives that, but then pops out the baby after, right? And then the male receives on the element of becoming a caretaker and the love that is received on the other end of it. So that's how I would define masculine and feminine. Especially, I think the hardest one in astrology to determine is Capricorn, because we always associate Saturn as kind of this masculine element, but actually Capricorn is a feminine sign. And so there is a feminine element that it does initiate as well. And then there is aspects of where, like when Mars comes into Libra, where it is at its detriment, where we actually can sometimes see the reversal, where diplomacy for where what you usually would initiate something would be, let's hear what you have to say and let me receive that and then initiate. Same thing in Capricorn with Saturn there as a feminine energy of I'm going to initiate of creation and then receive the benefits at the aftermath of that. So they're really, and that's why it's interesting to see those kind of formulations of it, that it can be both ways, that a feminine energy can initiate and then receive after, just as much as the masculine can at the beginning too. But I would say the more archetypal element is the masculine energy is more first initiation and the feminine is more receiving, but they both do the same role.
Great. God, I want you to ask me some of these questions too one day, okay? Because
I would love
Vedic
to.
idea on this, and you'll do that too, right?
Yeah, anytime.
Right. Okay, that made a ton of sense, and it's interesting too. This is the second series that I did of interviews. I did one in 2018 too, like 2017, 2018, with mostly Vedic scene people.
Mm-hmm.
And they really, I feel, they really kind of stumbled around on this type of a question and they weren't really able to like sharply pull out an answer. But so far, the two interviews that I've done in this series, which is more like global or Western type, you guys both just like nailed exactly what I feel is correct.
Mm,
Really
that's
clear.
interesting.
So sometimes I think if people have too many, oh, we can't say this, or we can't think this, or we can't allow this, and it prevents them from seeing the simple truths. But when people are more like, yeah, anything goes, let's just see what it really is, then you can just see Mars does this, Venus does that, boom, I understand male, female.
Yeah, and I think that the astrology teaches us so much about life and the understanding of the fundamentals of the universe. I think it is the ultimate teacher. And that's what's the most beautiful element of it all is when planets have these, and I really think it is important to find, where planets do come to their fall positions, where planets are exalted, where planets are in their dignity, because they teach you how the masculine or the feminine are at their peak, right?
Yeah,
Like Venus and Taurus is definitely at its peak, right? It's in its dignity, it's feminine, and there's a huge element of this receiving element where Mars and Aries is definitely at its home, and it wants to make it happen and go to war, take action on things. It doesn't want to delay. It's going to push down the castle wall now, where, then there's all the archetypes, they all teach us so much. I mean, and it's all right there in the astrology and where they go. And when they come into this sign, this is going to show you that like when Mars is in Libra, it has to not initiate at first. It has to receive another offer, and then it can make the choice, and it can't go in there and just demand what it wants and get it. It has to actually hear the other side before it can actually do the true initiation of actually what it's going to achieve or want. Or like Mars in Capricorn, in its awesome exaltation, it realizes that maybe learning to plan out a little bit more than just jump in and actually receive a little bit of, energy first and reserve some energy and get to the ultimate goal will happen that way.
yeah. Okay, final question. The ultimate question. Do you believe in God? What kind of conception of God do you have?
I definitely believe in God, but I believe that God and I believe that number one, just understanding, and I use astrology as my guidebook as far as this understanding. I look at the three outer planets as the subconscious realms of our mind, and I feel that beyond that, we are in a space where we are trying to right now figure out what that looks like. And I feel that there is nobody here that actually can fully grasp and understand the creator right now. So I feel that there is definitely a higher force, but I feel that that higher force is evolving on the same rate that we are. And I feel that whatever it gains in consciousness, it then, after it gains it, and I've always used the analogy of like the Russian dolls on how they go from big to little, like, and how they pass it on. Like, I feel like this creator force gains knowledge and then regurgitates it back. And then everything moves forward from whenever that higher force is moving forward and it's on its path, which kind of in a weird way is the predetermination element of astrology, in my opinion, is how there is this kind of pre-written understanding where possibly at the end of the day, that creator, as it's evolving forward already, in a weird kind of way, maybe already has gone through the cycle and we're replaying this, or I can go into this topic for hours, but I definitely feel that there's a creator and a God, but I don't believe that any human on the planet that we know that is in this existence right now actually fundamentally is ready to even understand that. I'm a big believer in, you know, there was Timothy Leary, there was Terence McKenna, and they were very big in understanding the psychedelic realms and understanding how to reach outside the bandwidth frequency of our minds. And I did a lot of those experimentations when I was younger, especially following a lot of Timothy Leary's stuff, which maybe I was stupid to do that at 19 and 20 years old, but I learned a lot from it. And I think of it like a radio. So if you look at a radio, it's 88.9 on FM and it goes to 107.9. And that's it. That's all you're allowed. Even today, if you go buy a brand new car, it's going to be there. But when you do psychedelics or even certain meditation elements, so if we don't go into the medicinal realms, but even there, I think there are forms that we can attribute in spirituality, we can break those barriers and start to tap into not only like a traditional linear, I guess, like, or kind of stuck place, but we can go infinite in any coordinate of as far as understanding the frequency waves. And I think that our brains and I think that our souls at the same time in our human bodies are going through this experience right now of awakening to be able to try and decipher and understand what some of these frequencies are. And we're at, I think, such a heightened internal point internally as an internal consciousness that people are feeling around the planet that's all connected, because there is this fear of not understanding what these energies are that are coming in, because it's a radio station starting to come in that we're not used to going to, and the commercials aren't the same, and the radio hosts don't sound the same, and even the language doesn't sound the same. And we've been having to kind of decipher this. And this is all connected, I think, with the actual physical consciousness of Voyager 1 that left in the 70s and is right now at what we call the heliosphere. I wrote a blog in 2012 about this because it blew my mind that during the 2012 cycle of the Mayan calendar ending was exactly when Voyager 1 had passed Pluto, and there it was going towards the heliosphere, which is this space between our solar system and the outer system of the universe, basically, and especially in our galaxy. And what's interesting is it's at a point to where they don't know how large this heliosphere is. I mean, we're having human consciousness in a physical form leaving the solar system. And I think Michael Luton did a great job of talking about that asteroid that came into our solar system this last year, that weird Hawaiian name one, like I forgot the name. It's so weird. But that asteroid that came in our system this year, even NASA just came out and said that thing is not from, this is the first time they've ever discovered anything outside of our solar system coming in. And then it just like made a pass. And NASA literally came out and said that it looked like it could be part of a higher conscious, like spaceship part or observing energy of our Earth or whatever, our solar system, in a way that we don't understand. Like we traditionally would think it would be aliens with pushing buttons on a computer. Well, that's human understanding of it. There are forms of consciousness out there that we don't even quite understand. And I think what's happening is all these energies around the universe are going through, and this is where it connects to the God aspect, is we are all going through this point of trying to understand what is going on, and we all have it from our own frequency band that we've been in. But now all the frequency bands are starting to break their barriers, and they're all starting to come like in a mixture in a weird place. And so that's why I don't think that we understand it completely yet. But I feel that in our lifetimes, we are going to have revelations, especially I think this next decade. And I don't believe in the traditional element of like alien kind of, disclosure of that we see in a lot of the talks today. I feel that it's a much more kind of coincidental slash synchronistic element of a lot of other forms of consciousness out there, whatever it might be, because you can't define it if we don't know it, that are all clashing and coming together to connect and understand completely the whole picture. Look at the zodiac. When all 12 signs come together, there's an understanding. When all the planets are understood and they come together with the zodiac, there's an understanding. Right now, I feel humanity is just like a zodiac sign. And I feel that there is a bunch of other zodiac signs out there of consciousness, whatever it might be. I mean, a lot of the spiritual community thinks they're reptilians or they think they're Palladians. And I mean, yeah, I associate with a lot of that stuff too. But I feel that we have no idea what it is. And until all those tribes of consciousness come together, then there's the understanding. And I think that's where my answer on the God thing is.
So one thing was super, super interesting and important to me was that you don't think of God as something that's already static and perfect and achieved, but it's an evolving
Yeah.
consciousness itself. That's very, very interesting. And then, yeah, and how it's co-evolving along with all of us, right? That's kind of what you were talking about the whole time.
Yeah, it almost is like I mean, like we are, I mean, and whenever you say this too, it triggers people, but it's like, I think that we all are God. We all are God trying, we are parts of God that are, and then there's these like, you know, I call them tribes, I guess now, or let's use astrology. So there's all these other zodiac signs out there that they are trying to figure it out too. And they're in a search and when it all somehow comes together, it's almost like God will finally understand its whole entire understanding of itself, which I don't even think God understands its whole understanding of itself right now either.
Yeah, great. God, I can't wait to do my own, where I ask myself my own questions, or you guys ask me, because you guys are
Oh,
getting
that'd
me
be
one step.
anytime.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
No, hey man, I just want to say when I first found you, I loved your stuff. When I finally got to meet you at UAC this year, you were just a huge sigh of relief as a great person and to meet, just besides being an astrologer, just as a person. Such a great man, so fun to talk to. And then as an astrologer, what you've done, and I think you have a lot of courage in your heart. You are a leader in many ways. You step up into what you want to say, you say how you want to say it, but you have such an elegance about it. And I think that people have to remember that instead of always associating with the triggers that you've brought up, because you do it in a very elegant way. And I think that you have so much connection with so many different parts of the world, and your life has been an extreme. You've been all over. You really have been more of a seasoned individual who's really got to experience a lot of different culture and a lot of different understandings. So you're very special to the community that you can help bring those elements. I've never been to a lot of these parts of the world or got to understand them. So I look up to you because it's great to be able to receive as a astrologer and as a conscious human being the work that you do, because you bring an element that I know I can't bring and that I can learn from. So I just want to say that about you and just say that's what is one thing that makes you very special. There's
Thank
many others, but
Thank you for embarrassing me on my YouTube channel.
that's what I like to do.
Great.
But
All right, great. Then I guess we'll just say goodbye and hopefully do this again sometime soon.
yeah, well, thank you again, Vic.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.